News Talk 1340 KROC AM. Good morning. I'm Andy Brownell, Rochester today on a beautiful Monday. In the studio with me this morning, Alan Calvano. It's time for our monthly Rochester History program right here at KROC. Good morning, Alan. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Andy.
What a gorgeous day, huh, to start out a week?
It is. What are we doing inside?
Gosh, yeah, what do we open the windows? Too bad they don't open in this building. No. I've long lamented that. Well, Alan's here, and once a month we try to get together and bring up a topic of Rochester history, maybe some feature of the community that jogs a few memories. And I know Alan, we're going to talk about something today that certainly is prominent in Rochester, and it's the Mayo Clinic. And they're celebrating, of course, their sesquicentennial. And we'd love to hear from you today at 282-1234 if you have any special memories of maybe working at Mayo or being a patient there or any sort of affiliation. But I know before we even dive into that, you got a couple events you want to talk about as well.
Yeah, I wanted to put in a plug. First off, Ken Olson has rewritten his Harold Crawford book, and it's much improved. And he's going to have a book signing this coming Thursday out at the History Center from 7 to 9. And there'll be refreshments, and that's free. So I'd encourage anybody that is even vaguely interested in Rochester's architectural history to come to that Thursday night from 7 to 9.
It's a neat book. He's added a lot of pictures and a lot more biographical information as well.
He did. Actually, it's interesting. His first book prompted a lot of feedback from people who either were in a Crawford home or thought they were a Crawford home or knew some aspect of Harold's life, and Ken incorporated all of that into. He had an addendum for a while, and now he's gotten a grant from the Southeast Minnesota Arts Council to rewrite the book completely, so it's much improved.
And he's added more drawings, too, of the buildings that Harold designed, and it's just amazing.
And not only are there additional photos, but he retook most of the original photos, so they're higher quality photos. So it's a much nicer book than the first one was.
Yeah, the entire presentation turned out really nice.
Of course, he's had 3 other books under his belt since the first one, so he's improved a lot, too. It's a super book. The other thing I wanted to plug briefly was once a month on the second Wednesday of each month out at the History Center, we have something called Coffee at the Princess Cafe. And we call it that because we have a chunk of the Princess Cafe soda fountain out at the History Center. Anyway, it's a lecture each month that's on some aspect of Rochester's history. And this next month, Paul Keller, who's done a number of really interesting Princess Cafe presentations, is going to be talking about the history of Christmas Anonymous, ho, ho, ho. And that should be really interesting. We were going to do it in November, but Paul had a conflict, so we're doing it a little bit earlier than we originally planned. But that's going to be October 8th from 9 till 10. And that's free to History Center members, and I think it's $2 for non-members, but then there's cookies and coffee, so pretty much everybody gets their $2 worth, even if they have to pay.
Christmas Anonymous still active in the Rochester
Absolutely,
area.
Yeah, and Paul apparently is active in that. And then the third thing, it really has nothing to do with the History Center, but every year the Mayo Clinic celebrates their Heritage Days, and I think that's usually the first full week in October. Anyway, this year it's from October 6th to 10th. And that's what got me thinking about maybe we should talk about the Mayo Clinic, because I think I do step-on bus tours for people coming through town, and I did one on Friday for a group of 27 Norwegian people who didn't speak English. Fortunately, they had a translator. But I got thinking that I was telling them a lot of things that people who live here in Rochester probably don't know. So I thought maybe we could talk about some of those things this morning.
You know, a lot of folks here in town, you look at Mayowood, have never visited Mayowood, and a lot of people who work at Mayo probably aren't aware of a lot of the history of it as well.
Actually, the fact that you mentioned Mayowood, that's another interesting one. I'm not sure exactly what date, but in the next couple of weeks they're going to reenact what had been an annual event in Rochester at Mayo with they have a chrysanthemum show every October, and History Center's doing one of those, I think either next Sunday or the Sunday after, but they can call History Center to check on that. And I guess they got thousands and thousands of chrysanthemums out there, so it should be really cool. And that kind of celebrates the reopening of Mayowood, because the clinic's been paying for quite a few renovations out at Mayowood. They've added an elevator and some
the elevator's in.
Real bathrooms, and they've repaid the driveway. I haven't been out there probably in close to 6 months, but I've heard it's much improved.
I know that when they tore apart that entrance, when it was collapsing.
Right.
And it was amazing the amount of work they had to do to put that thing back together. It was
the stairways in front that goes all the way up to the house. That's all been replaced, and they've done an incredible amount of work up there.
Wow, I got to get out there and see that as well. All right, we're going to take a really quick break. Alan Calvano in the studio. We're going to talk about some of the Heritage Days. Mayo Clinic's history. That would probably be the best way to put it, which, of course, is central to the history of our community as well. 282-1234 is the number to call if you'd like to join the conversation this morning on KROC AM. Back in just a moment. KROC AM, it's 58 in downtown Rochester. 19 minutes past 10 o'clock. I'm Andy Brownell with Alan Calavano. It's our Rochester History Show here at KROC AM. And our phone number is 282-1234. And, Alan, we do have a caller who's been on hold through the break. Good morning.
Super.
Thanks for calling in. Good morning.
Just a reminder, October 1st is also the 150th anniversary of the first choo-choo train in town.
Is that right?
That. Cool, okay.
Yeah, October 14th, 1860, or October 1st, 1864, I believe.
That would have been the Great Western. That might have preceded that as well. Or was
anything planned?
Nothing that I know of.
Okay.
They're kind of de-emphasizing railroads
the whole train
lately.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, too bad that old DM&E isn't in town. They'd have the steamer with a passenger coaches on it.
They did have that one. I know that Kevin Schaefer, when he owned the railroad, restored one of the old rail cars, and he would move it around quite a bit.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the call.
I didn't realize the railroad went back that far, because that was only like 6 years after Rochester was settled in 1858. Right. So they didn't waste any time getting the railroad through.
Well,
here.
you talked about the Crawford book, and that's how that would have been prior. Well, that would have been late 1800s, I guess, when he traveled west. So that would have been 20 years later.
Yeah, I'd have to ask Ken about that.
Okay, Mayo Clinic. You give these tours, Alan.
I do. Two hooks to the clinic. I spend 2 hours a week, actually on Tuesdays from 11 to 1, in what's called the Historical Suite. And I wonder how many people in Rochester have never been to the Historical Suite. And if that's the case, shame on you, because it's on the third floor of the Plummer Building, and it's basically been historically kept the way it was when Dr. Will and Dr. Charlie had their offices there. And there's also the old boardroom, which is where the Mayo Clinic Board of Directors met until they built the Mayo Building. And it's pretty much as it was back in 1914. In fact, or 1928, I'm sorry, because the clinic the Plummer Building was built in 1928. But I've seen pictures of it from the 1930s, and like the boardroom has all the certificates that Will and Charlie received over their lifetime. The whole room was full of these certificates, and it looked the same in 1930 as it does last week. I mean, it's just incredible. And they've also got in one of the rooms 2 Nobel Prizes that were won by Dr. Kendall and Dr. Hench for discovering cortisone. So right here in Rochester, you can see real live Nobel Prizes.
And you show up at the Plummer Building.
It's on the third floor of the Plummer Building. It's open from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. They have a guide in there, like I do, from 11 to 1. But then the rest of the time it's self-guided. There is a brochure that tells you pretty much everything that's in the suite. During lunchtime, when the guide is there, you can ask questions. But the staff is there most of the time, and they can usually answer questions. And then the clinic actually has a tour of the whole clinic that you can take, and they usually come through at noontime with a group of people that are touring the clinic. You know, that's kind of more abbreviated.
But because they have all the artwork, I suppose.
Right, they cover quite a bit of the clinic rather than just the Historical Suite. But then, in addition to the Historical Suite, in the Mayo Building on the ground floor, there's the Heritage Museum, which is also very interesting, and that's got Dr. Will liked to go to the Mississippi River on weekends, and over time he owned 3 different steamships, and there are photos of them in the Historical Suite. But in the museum, they actually have models of the steamships, and there's a big steamship wheel. You can almost make believe you're driving the steamship, and there's a horn you can blow, and lots of videotapes, and that's more modern stuff. But that's also very interesting, and that's also free, and that's also from 8 till 5.
Well, there you go.
Absolutely.
I bet a lot of folks listening right now were not aware that if you were looking for something to do, you can do that at any time during the week. Well,
if anybody wants to come down there tomorrow from 11 to 1, when I'll be there, I'll be happy to answer any questions they have. But there is someone there 5 days a week from 11 to 1, and then it's open, free self-guided tours from 8 till 5 every day, except weekends, obviously.
Well, I guess maybe to start out with, Alan, you kind of teased us with maybe there's some things, some facts, some information that even folks who live in this town, who have lived here for a long time, might not be aware of. Maybe throw one at us that you might buy.
Another thing that's really fun to do, and I tell this to the people that come through when I'm there, the carillon on top of the Plummer. Now, for the most part, I'm talking about the 1928 clinic, which is the Plummer building. But the original clinic was the 1914 building, which is where the Siebens building is now.
Right.
And that was the first building that was actually called the Mayo Clinic. And it was designed by Dr. Henry Plummer for a group practice, which was very new back then. Typically, doctors practiced by themselves. So Dr. Plummer designed it so that a group of doctors could work together and specialize, and it had laboratories and waiting rooms and all that kind of stuff. That was actually built where Dr. William Worrell Mayo, the father's home, had been on that corner originally.
See, I didn't know that.
And they tore his house down to build the 1914 clinic, and then later, much later, they tore down the 1914 clinic to build the Siebens building. After they outgrew the 1914 building, they built the Plummer building, which was it's also called the 1928 building because that's when it opened. Yeah. And Dr. Plummer designed that as well.
Isn't that funny? 14 years later?
Right.
Because when they built the 14 building, they thought, we'll never outgrow this space.
Absolutely. And in fact, I was reading the other day that there's a couple of really interesting histories about St. Mary's. And when they opened St. Mary's, they didn't mean to exclude other doctors from being part of that practice, but the other doctors in Rochester were so convinced that St. Mary's was going to fail, they didn't want anything to do with it. Because back then, when you had a hospital, you typically died. If you weren't sick enough to go in when you died, you would get infection in the hospital and die from the infection. So most of the other doctors in town wanted, it wasn't meant to be exclusive to the Mayo brothers, it's just that the other doctors didn't want any part of it. And actually, some of the sisters didn't want any part of it either because they were teachers. And they didn't really want to get involved in medicine. They signed up to be teachers, and they wanted to stay teachers.
Now you're going to be a nurse? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that was quite a departure.
282-1234 is the number. Alan, we do have a caller. Good morning. You're on KROC.
Hi, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Did you mention about the library up there in the top of the Plummer up there?
No, we didn't get to that yet, but there is a very pretty library. Actually, the top 3 or 4 floors are library, and on floors 12 and 14, they have very pretty rooms.
There's another place up there. There's another private library on top of that. I worked down there quite a bit, extensively.
Okay.
And, I've been in a lot of places a lot of people haven't. I've been up there in the tower and everything. Where they took down the bells and they had they took them over there to another place, and they had heat them up for like I don't know, about a week, I guess, And but they replaced some of the bells up there. Not replaced them, but fixed them. They
tuned them.
Yes. Well, the thing is the bolts were going bad on them.
Okay. And
so they replaced the bolts up there, and that was quite a job.
I bet.
With those huge bells, we had to build scaffold up there, and then the guy would come up there and he'd jack the bells up and replace the bolts and make sure everything was good. And then, but there's another private library above that, and they have I believe it's gas in there. They don't have like water, like sprinkler system, because of the rare books up there they have,
sure.
And they're beautiful, and so that's all. It's all gas-driven. In case there was a fire up there, the gas would put the fire out.
Sure, you wouldn't want to get them all wet.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Gas.
And it's really something. There's quite a few little places, and there are a lot of people haven't seen, and it was pretty neat for me.
It's just such a cool building.
It is.
So anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the call.
Now, the one thing I will add to that is a lot of those areas aren't open to the public, whereas the third floor is.
Third floor is.
Right. Yeah. The rest of the library of rare books is primarily for authors doing research and doctors at the clinic.
You got to have an invite.
Right.
Get up
right.
There.
Those are private.
I just can't imagine being up on that scaffolding, working on the bells up there.
Well,
not for
as
me.
long as the bells came up, we should talk about that for a bit. Originally, those bells weren't supposed to be on top of the building. In fact, Dr. Plummer didn't think the building could support the weight, but fortunately it had been designed with enough redundancy that it could. But originally, Dr. Will Mayo was in Europe, and he fell in love with the idea of having a carillon, and then they had to figure out where to put it. Originally, they were going to put it on the Congregational Church, which was kind of cat a corner across the street. They called it the White Temple. But they decided it needed to be up as high as possible. And another place they looked at putting it was on top of the water tower up on St. Mary's Hill.
Oh, really?
Behind St. Mary's, probably that old water tower that's still there.
Right.
But anyway, somehow they convinced Dr. Plummer. I don't think he wanted it on top of his building, to be perfectly honest with you. Eventually, they convinced Dr. Plummer to put it on top of the Plummer building, or the 1928 building, and they added that peak. Originally, that peaked roof was supposed to be flat below the Carillon to match the two flat sides of the building. If you look at it, you can see it could have worked very well that way.
And it wouldn't have been anywhere near as a magnificent building.
No, it was actually a big improvement as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, aesthetically, yeah.
But that's another thing people don't know. You can actually, with prior arrangements, go up to the Carillon when the Carillioner is playing them. And Lee Ofdahl is the Carillioner. He's only the third Carillioner that had. The first Carillioner, I think it was Mr. Drummond, or Desmond, I'm not sure what his name was, but he was there for 30 years, and then he was replaced by another guy who was there for 40-some years. And now Lee's been there, I think, 10 plus. So he's only the third Carillioner they've had. But with prior arrangements, you can go up when he plays, and he plays concerts Monday night at 7, Wednesday at noon, and Friday at noon. And that's a kick.
And I also appreciate that they have brought back the quarter-hour chimes.
Uh-huh.
You don't realize you miss it until they brought it back.
I see, and I never knew they ever did it.
Yeah, when I grew up in town here, and
okay.
It was always a background noise downtown.
Right.
And now I've grown accustomed to it again, and it's 6:30. I know it's 6:30 because I just heard the chime.
Cool.
We have to take our break for news. Alan Calavanos here in the studio. 282-1234 is our number. We can take some more phone calls after the news break, and that is coming up next. It's 59 in downtown Rochester at KROC-AM. KROC-AM. It's 59 downtown Rochester. I'm Andy Brownell, KROC-AM. Alan Calavanos in the studio. Rochester History program today. Once a month we get together and talk about some aspect of our community's history. We take your calls at 282-1234. Alan, between the last time we talked and now, during the news break, our caller who was previously on talking about the Carillon bells and had been involved in some of the work up there on top of the Plummer building had mentioned that if you do go up there to pay attention to I guess there's huge water tanks up there. They're big black tanks. And back in the day, were tied into either the sprinkler system, the original sprinkler system for that structure, or probably, as in many buildings of that era, that was part of the pressurization for the water system throughout the entire building. But it's something to take note of if you do get a chance to go up there.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's still used. I'll have to ask the next time I'm over there. I'll be over there tomorrow, but it may have become obsolete. Let me clean up something that I kind of messed up before. There have been 3 Carillioners, that part's for sure. The first one was Dean Robinson, and he served as Carillioner for 46 years, from 1958 until his death in 2004. Okay, the original Carillioner was James Drummond, and he served until 1958 for 30 years. Dean Robinson, I knew Dean, and he used to tell people that he had the highest paid job at the clinic. Little Carillioner humor there. Yeah. Anyway, and the other thing about the Carillon is it's got 56 bells currently. It originally had 23 bells, and they added another 33, so they're 56 now. And in the historical suite, they have the original practice console where the Carillioner could practice without everybody in town hearing him. And then, of course, when they added the other bells, they had to make a different practice console. But the way that works, I'm told, is that the bells are fixed, and when you actually pound on the key, it's sort of like playing a piano with your fist, because what you're doing is you're pulling the clapper, and the harder you hit the bell, the louder the clapper hits the bell.
So you're getting a physical workout.
Yeah, it's a physical job for sure. They play with their hands and their feet like they would an organ. And again, like I say, if you call the day before, there is a phone number you can call, and you can go up there when the Carillioner, who is currently Jeff Don, is playing. He has a little house that he sits in, so in the wintertime he doesn't freeze his buns off. But you do get a really pretty view of the city up there, and of course you hear the bells pretty well.
Yeah.
But it's not deafening. I mean, you do have it isn't handicapped accessible. Unfortunately, you have to climb some stairs to get to the last part.
Yeah.
But it is cool if you get a chance to go up there.
282-1234 is our number. Good morning. You're on KROC.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
We used to put stars up there every Christmas time on the bell tower.
Cool.
And then they used to be right underneath it. And then, like you said, but then he had special gloves on.
Mm-hmm.
He'd hit that so hard, and then it seemed like every time we'd have to put the stars up, he'd start playing it. And then the stars were 24-foot tip to tip that we used to hang up there on all four sides.
I suppose they had to be visible from the ground. You're
Right.
so high off the ground.
Were you on the maintenance staff there?
No, we was with a sign company, used to take care of all of it.
Okay.
The decorating for mail inside and then outside. And we used to do the trees on the side of the building, too.
Oh, yeah.
And they're doing that again, aren't they? Didn't they start this year or last with they were lighting up the offices to have a Christmas tree on the side
The
of the
windows,
building?
yeah. I don't know if they're
In the
doing
windows,
streets.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
But then on the side of the mail building, them trees there, we used to put the lights on them.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Good.
That must have been neat to get up there on top of that building. I don't know. I'm
Oh,
afraid.
it was. And then we had to go up and then rig up a block and tackle to drop it down to lift the star up. And
So-
then, the guys would have to be up there, and then you'd have to have guys on the inside because you had cables that you'd run out with turnbuckles on.
Okay.
To hook onto the stars.
That's interesting.
So you ran them all the way on the outside from the street up.
Well, we tore them apart and kept them up there, but to
Okay.
originally get them up there, we had to take them up the outside of the building,
Okay.
all the way up.
What company did you work for?
Well, it started out with Nagley doing it,
Okay.
and then Triad did it for a while after that, and then they kind of quit.
Okay. Cool.
I hope they bring it back.
Yeah, but the stars disappeared the last time I was up there. Somebody cut them because they were all made out of aluminum channel,
Okay. Sure.
and then they disappeared. 'cause
You think somebody might have
cashed in on it or whatever?
Yeah, maybe somebody scrapped them. That's too bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, thanks a lot for the call.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Hey, we do have another call in, Alan. Good morning.
Sure.
Good morning. You're on KROC.
Hello?
Hello. Good morning.
Oh, yeah, I hear those chimes every 15 minutes.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, they're every 15 minutes they're played by a computer, and then 3 times a week they actually give concerts where the Caroliners up there.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if the Caroliner just feels like it, he goes up there and plays them. I mean, there's nothing to stop him from doing it if he's in the mood.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
And
they
there aren't
just started up the quarter-hour chimes again with the
right.
sesquicentennial.
Yeah, I think they needed something to make that happen. And then there aren't that many carillons in the world. I don't know how many exactly. I'm thinking the dozens. But a lot of times they'll have visiting caroliners come and play either during whether the scheduled times or some special concert. And a good place to listen to the bells, I'm told, I've never actually done it, but is where the Dolphin with the boy that's
down
on
below?
the back of the Dolphin in that little corner of the mail building.
I bet the sound bounces off quite
Right.
nicely over there. Yeah.
But if you think about it, that's an interesting thing. They didn't want the bells to be so loud that it would bother the patients, and you don't actually hear them typically inside the building. You only hear them when you're outside.
You're right. We hear them quite nicely where we're at, which
Right.
is 2 blocks south.
Uh-huh.
Because there's really nothing obstructing it to get over here. Wow.
So I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested to try and get up to the Carillon. That's fun, and absolutely everybody should come to the historical suite. The other thing that we talked about during the break were the bronze doors, which are not actually, as was pointed out in the answer man, they're not actually the entrance to the mail building. They're really between the mail building and where the 1914 building had been. If you look at them, the doors don't actually go into the plumber building. They go into the piece between them.
Right.
Those doors I think they weigh like 2 tons. They're very heavy. And the original plan was to have those doors close every night when the clinic closed. But the doors were so heavy that didn't turn out to be practical. I didn't know if there was a problem with the motors or whatever. So they've only officially closed them on certain ceremonial days, typically when somebody important passes away. I think they've documented about 10 or 12 official closings of the doors.
It seems to me when Ronald Reagan passed away was probably the most recent.
Quite possibly. Well, I know they closed at 9/11.
Oh, you're right.
So that probably may very well have been the last time. They closed when Will and Charlie each died. They did actually one unceremonial closing was when they did there's a poster floating around called The Doors of Rochester. And they closed the doors to take a picture of them for the Doors of Rochester. That was the one unceremonial.
That's off the books.
At least one unceremonial closing.
At least one. All right. But yeah, that's if you go down there, just look at when that Plummer building it's a work of art, is what it is.
You could spend hours just looking at the doors. There's all kinds of symbolism in the doors.
Oh my goodness!
And the frame around the doors.
Yeah, and that's just the doors. And
right.
Then you move on to the corner pieces and the window pieces.
Right, and the lobby is very pretty.
Oh my goodness!
The elevator doors are very pretty.
And I look back in 1928 when that thing went up, and number one, the type of construction it was something that had not been tried in this part of the country yet. And they brought in, and they were putting up the big steel beams, and they, the erector set construction, and at the time, it just dominated the landscape. And it still does to a degree, but at that point, it must have just been amazing that in this little town by the cornfields, they had a structure like that.
It really was. And in fact, as we talked in the break, I think originally that was the tallest building in Minnesota up until the time they built the Fauché Tower in Minneapolis, which is pretty incredible, too, when you think about it.
And the Art Deco stuff you find inside there is just it's very, very cool building.
When people come through on tours, I tell them to try and get into the upper floors of the Mayo Building or the Gonda Building and look back at the top of the Plummer Building to see all the gargoyles and nurses and stuff that are up there. It's really cool. A lot of people ask me why they built such a fancy building. And I don't have an absolute answer, but I suspect it has something to do with, it's the same basic principle as the fact that there's so many flowers and concerts at the clinic. They want to heal your soul as well as your spirit as well as your body.
It's part of the overall.
It's to make you feel good.
Well, even the 1914 building, if you look at the photographs of it when it opened up, it was opulent.
It was very similar to the Plummer building, just on a smaller scale.
282-1234 is our number. Good morning. You're on KROC.
I remember about the plaster ceilings up there. They're beautiful. They're all hand painted, and they're gorgeous as far as a lot of them go. Some of them got taken down, which is a shame, but they still have the old plaster casts.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, they still have the old plaster casts up there in I believe it's 13th floor. I think 13, 14, I guess. But anyway. It's just a holding area for everything up there, and I was up there, and they still have the old plaster casts, original ones. So if they ever had to do them over again, they could if they had if they had the people that could actually do it.
Okay.
I know there's specialists who can do that kind of thing now. They're artists, but so obviously you were up there in that building quite often. Oh, we lost him. I was going to ask him what he did.
Okay.
That would have been interesting because obviously he had access to a lot of the building for his job.
Well, in the old boardroom, they still have the original ceiling with all of that painted and cast.
The plaster poured stuff.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the process is, but it's extremely pretty. And they also have stained glass windows. So it's a very pretty room.
All right, Ellen, we do have another caller. Good morning. You're on KROC. Hi, good morning.
Good morning to you, gentlemen.
What can we do for you?
Well, the community education calendar catalog that comes out in everyone's mailbox a number of years ago, and I think they still do this, has listed the tour that you can actually take to go to and listen to the carillon, the bells, go up, climb the ladder, etc. It was relatively inexpensive.
It's free.
I think they limited it to like 10 or 12 people, but they did have 3 or 4 dates, and the operator would meet you on the lobby level in the main building there, and you'd take the elevator up, and he'd give you the guided tour. It was extremely educational. They had earplugs that if you wanted to take the final steps and literally touch the bells, you wouldn't touch them, but you'd be that close, you could. And it was through the community education catalog. I don't know if they're still doing it. They should, because it's relatively inexpensive and extremely educational.
Well, maybe they can bring it back. That's for sure if they're not doing it.
Well, I mean, you really don't even have to. You can just do it directly through the clinic, and it's free. I think that might have been a special thing in that one particular year. But, yeah, if you call the carol honor the day before, you can just go up there pretty much any time he doesn't already have a capacity crowd. He factually enjoys the company, as far as I know. Of course, he may not after this, but...
So that if you want to go back up there again, you could just give Mayo a call and they'll accommodate. Okay, I got to ask you this. You said he's got a little house up there to keep him away from the elements in the wintertime. Right. Originally, did the Carolina have that, or were they out there in the cold playing?
I don't know. I'm thinking they probably had some kind of shelter. They would have needed it in the winter. Yeah. As far as I know, they play it all year round and have from the beginning. So they would, it'd be kind of silly not to provide something like that.
Put them up there in the wind.
Yeah. The bells would stop when the Carolina froze.
Okay, Alan, anything, we've got a few minutes left, so I guess if you got anything else, we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have. Let's see, what else? I can mention that the bells vary, and the smallest one is 130 pounds, and the biggest one is 2 tons, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the big one is 6 feet high, 4 tons, 7,840 pounds is the biggest bell, and that's 6 feet tall. Smallest one is 168 pounds. The carillon is dedicated to the American soldier, which is interesting. A lot of people don't know that. The first set of bells came from England, and then the other 33 came from Holland when they added those later. And there is actually, in addition to the practice console, there's one of the small bells in the historical suite that had to be replaced because it cracked, which was interesting.
Well, that must have been a spectacle as well, the day that they
absolutely
put the bells up on top of the building.
I'm sure they were hauling them up there for a couple of weeks.
I know, but they had to do it on the outside of the building.
Yeah,
it must
absolutely.
Have been one heck of a structure to haul 2 tons up there.
Yeah, there's a picture in the historical suite of someone standing next to one of the big bells on the ground before they hauled it up there.
Because they were not, back in the day, they didn't have the big cranes that you put in and erect. They were building the cranes as part of the structure.
Yeah, I don't know much about that part, but I'm sure you're right. Well, I don't know how much time we have, but let me plug again Ken's book signing on Thursday, this coming Thursday from 7 to 9 out at the History Center, his book about Harold Crawford. And then the Princess Cafe on October 8th from 9 to 10 about Christmas Anonymous. And the Heritage Days at the clinic from October 6th to 10th, which is something they do every year, and they usually make a video of something historical. And that's open to the public for free showings.
And in the area between the 2 Mayo buildings, they usually put some displays out, some vehicles.
Yeah, there are going to be a couple of historic cars. I remember seeing a notice about that.
We're going to take a quick break. Alan Calavano's here in the studio at KROC AM. 60 degrees downtown Rochester. It is 8 minutes away from 11 o'clock. Back in just a moment.
Weather Eye Forecast on News Talk 1340 KROC AM.
It's brought to you by Mystic Lake Casino. Masters of Illusion is coming to Mystic Lake October 11th. Believe the impossible and see mind-bending magic from the hit TV show performed live. You get your tickets now at mysticlake.com. Today, pretty darn nice day for this time of the year. We're expecting sunshine and a high of 70 degrees, a low in the upper 40s tonight, and then tomorrow, sunshine, and again, a high of about 70 degrees. Mid-50s with a chance of scattered showers developing late tomorrow night. And on Wednesday, there is a chance of scattered showers in the morning. Otherwise, a mostly cloudy day and a high of about 70 degrees. Mid-70s when we get to Thursday with partly cloudy skies. Friday, sunshine and 76. And another nice day on Saturday with a high in the mid to upper 70s forecast. Right now, we're at 60 in downtown Rochester at KROC AM. 3 minutes away from 11 o'clock. On a Monday morning, Alan Calavano's in the studio with myself, and I'm Andy Brownell. At 282-1234 is our number. We were talking Rochester history with a focus on the Mayo Clinic and some of the tidbits that a lot of folks who live here today probably aren't aware of. And, Alan, I got to ask you this. When you do the tours and you serve as the guide at the suite, the offices, the historic offices in the Plummer Building, is there any question that comes up just about all the time? Or
yes.
Okay.
They want to know if there are many Mayos practicing doctors at the clinic now. And there are not.
There are not.
I am told that there are a couple of Mayo descendants who are doctors in California. But I also explained that I think that's a mutual thing because I think it could be really difficult to be Dr. Mayo at the Mayo Clinic because people would expect you to know everything, for one thing.
And they'd want Dr. Mayo.
And they'd ask for Dr. Mayo, yeah, and obviously that's not going to work out so good. So I think if I were a Mayo, I'd probably want to be someplace else.
And I don't know of any of the direct descendants. I'm sure there are. There's got to be some that live here still. But
there are some Mayos living in Rochester. I think out by Mayowood there are a couple that still live here in Rochester, but they're not doctors. The other thing that you have to think about is Will and Charlie had an older sister named Gertrude, and she married a doctor. I just went blank. Anyway, her Dr. Berkman. So her descendants wouldn't be Mayos; they'd be Berkmans. So any time a Mayo female descendant married someone else and took his name, their descendants would change. The names would change.
Sure.
So even if there were Mayo descendants, the good chances are they wouldn't be Mayos. They'd be something else. At least 50% of the time they'd be something else, and that would have changed now 3 or 4 generations. Actually, Dr. Gertrude Berkman's children, several of them became doctors, and several of them became Dr. Berkmans at the Mayo Clinic.
Was that right?
Yeah, but they wouldn't be Mayos. And as far as I did ask if there were any, descendants under other names at the clinic as doctors. I think there are some working there, but not as doctors. But that question comes up almost every almost every time.
Do they get to use this office if there were one? No.
If I were one of them, I wouldn't. I'd want to be someplace where nobody could find me.
Is there any particular object in the office that attracts the most attention?
Well, the Nobel Prizes are pretty cool.
Oh, sure.
Dr. Will and Dr. Charlie have certain personal artifacts there. Dr. Will has a passport in his wallet. I tell people that Dr. Will and Dr. Charlie were very close, but they were very different. Dr. Will was rather formal, whereas Dr. Charlie was more sociable. Dr. Charlie was a Mason. He was involved with the Boy Scouts, but then he had 2 sons who became doctors at the clinic, so he had incentive to have involvement with the Scouts. Whereas Dr. Will had 2 daughters who married doctors, but they, of course, weren't doctors themselves. And Dr. Will's wife, Hattie Damon Mayo, her father was a local jeweler. So while she entertained a lot of doctors, she wasn't personally involved in medicine, whereas Dr. Charlie's wife, Edith Graham Mayo, was one of the first nurses in Rochester.
Right.
She was the first licensed nurse in Rochester, and Charlie met her through the clinic.
A lot of interesting stories that we could go on and on with. But we are already out of time, Alan.
Okay, sounds good.
And we'll look forward to another Rochester History program in a few weeks. In October, we'll do it again.